Ma'am, stand up. Security says you snuck in. Grab your things and leave now.
I'm a first-class passenger, and you're interrupting federal business. Check the desk before you escalate.
I'm done checking. Show ID or you're going in cuffs for trespass.
Then cuff me, because that Axon timestamp is...
Officer Derek Thorne had nearly 10 years on the job with the Transit Authority Police, a decade that should have taught him the difference between a threat and a dignitary, but instead had only calcified his arrogance. At 34 years old, Thorne walked the beat with a chip on his shoulder the size of the terminal itself, convinced that his badge granted him not just authority, but infallibility. It was a Tuesday morning, bright and clear, the kind of day that usually promised a smooth shift. Instead, at 10:15 a.m., Thorne walked into a scenario that would not only obliterate his pension and his reputation, but would cost the city's taxpayers a staggering $6.8 million in settlements. He didn't know it yet, but the woman he was about to humiliate wasn't just a commuter, and she certainly wasn't a trespasser. She was the Honorable Evelyn Vance, a sitting judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, a woman whose understanding of the Fourth Amendment was deeper than Thorne's entire understanding of the world. What happened next in the high-ceilinged, sun-drenched atrium of Metro Central Station serves as a brutal reminder of what happens when unchecked bias meets absolute power. Before we dive into the details of this catastrophic failure of judgment, tell me, where are you tuning in from today? If you appreciate stories that hold power accountable, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We are here to shine a light in the dark corners of the justice system. Metro Central Station is a cathedral of transportation, a sprawling Beaux-Arts masterpiece of limestone and marble that hums with the energy of thousands of travelers. On the upper level, overlooking the chaotic main concourse, sits the Diamond Lounge. It is a sanctuary for first-class passengers and high-tier members, a place of hushed tones, plush leather armchairs, and complimentary espresso. At that hour of the morning, the lounge was sparsely populated with business executives and senior partners preparing for midday meetings. The sunlight streamed through the massive arched windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Judge Evelyn Vance sat in a wingback chair near the far wall, a location she preferred for its vantage point and relative isolation. Judge Vance was a woman of immense stature. Not physically, she stood only 5'4", but in presence. At 62 years old, she carried the weight of history in her posture. She had spent 35 years in the legal profession, starting as a public defender in the gritty trenches of the city's criminal courts, moving to the U.S. Attorney's office, where she earned a reputation as a prosecutor who was tough but scrupulously fair, and finally being appointed to the federal bench. Her confirmation to the circuit court 7 years ago had been unanimous, a rare feat in a polarized political climate. She was known among her clerks and colleagues as the Scalpel, for her ability to cut through legal obfuscation to the heart of a constitutional issue. She didn't suffer fools, and she certainly didn't suffer violations of civil liberties. That morning, Judge Vance was dressed as she always was, impeccably. She wore a charcoal wool suit, a silk blouse, and a single strand of pearls that had belonged to her mother. Her reading glasses were perched on her nose as she reviewed a stack of appellate briefs, a red pen in her hand, marking confident strikes and queries in the margins. She was waiting for a courier from her chambers to deliver a signed order before she boarded the 11 o'clock a.m. express to D.C. for a conference. She had a valid first-class ticket tucked into her folio. She had shown her credentials to the front desk attendant, who had smiled and offered her a sparkling water. She was exactly where she was entitled to be, doing exactly what she was paid to do. But to the wrong set of eyes, none of that mattered. The wrong set of eyes belonged to Kyle Reed. Kyle was 25 years old, a shift supervisor for the private security firm contracted to manage the station's premium areas. He was young, ambitious in all the wrong ways, and possessed a deeply ingrained suspicion of anyone who didn't look like the typical clientele of the Diamond Lounge. In Kyle's limited worldview, the typical clientele was white male and corporate. When he did his rounds at 10:25 a.m., his gaze swept over the room and snagged on Judge Vance. He didn't see a federal judge reviewing case law. He saw an older black woman sitting in the best chair in the house, utilizing the free Wi-Fi and drinking the complimentary water. Kyle stopped near the coffee station, pretending to adjust a stack of napkins while he watched her. In his mind, the narrative constructed itself instantly. She must have slipped in behind a paying member when the automatic doors opened. Tailgating. It was a common enough trick, usually by teenagers or homeless individuals looking for a warm place to sleep. But Judge Vance wasn't sleeping. She was working. That didn't matter to Kyle. To him, her presence disrupted the exclusive atmosphere he was paid to protect. He didn't check the guest log. He didn't walk over and ask, "Excuse me, ma'am, may I see your ticket?" with the politeness his job description required. He decided that he wasn't going to confront her himself. He wanted the visual authority of the police to do the heavy lifting. He stepped out into the hallway, pulled out his radio, and called the Transit Police Dispatch. "Dispatch, this is Reed at the Diamond Lounge. I've got a 10 to 90, a trespasser refusing to vacate. Female, black 60s. She's camped out in the VIP section and doesn't belong here. I need an officer to remove her." The dispatcher asked if she was causing a disturbance. "She's loitering," Kyle lied, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And she's making the other guests nervous. I need her out before the morning rush picks up." The call was routed to Officer Derek Thorne, who was patrolling the main concourse just 2 levels down. Officer Thorne heard the code for trespassing and felt a surge of irritation. He hated babysitting calls, as he called them, but he also relished the chance to exert control. Thorne's personnel file was a minefield of red flags that the department had studiously ignored. In his 10 years, he had racked up 14 civilian complaints. Most were for discourtesy, but 4 involved excessive use of force, and all 4 involved minorities. He had a reputation for escalating situations, for turning a simple question into an interrogation and a minor infraction into an arrest. He believed in broken windows policing, but he applied it selectively. Thorne took the elevator up to the lounge level, adjusting his belt, preparing himself for a confrontation. He didn't expect a judge. He expected a homeless woman or a confused tourist who needed to be intimidated. When he walked into the Diamond Lounge, the scent of expensive leather and brewing coffee hit him. The room was quiet. Kyle Reed met him at the entrance, nodding toward the corner where Judge Vance sat. "Over there," Reed whispered, pointing. "She's been there for 45 minutes, just sitting there like she owns the place." Thorne looked. He saw a black woman in a suit reading papers. Most officers would have paused. They would have noted the pearls, the expensive folio, the calm demeanor. But Thorne operated on confirmation bias. The security guard said she was trespassing, so she was trespassing. The fact that she looked professional just meant she was a good con artist. Thorne marched across the carpeted floor, his heavy boots making a dull thudding sound that caused several businessmen to look up from their laptops. Judge Vance didn't look up. She was deep in the nuances of a maritime law precedent. Thorne stopped directly in front of her, casting a shadow over her paperwork. He waited a beat, expecting her to flinch or look guilty. When she didn't acknowledge him, he cleared his throat loudly. "Ma'am," he barked, not waiting for a response. "We need to go." Judge Vance paused her pen, hovering over the page. She looked up slowly, peering over the rim of her reading glasses. Her expression wasn't fearful. It was mildly annoyed, the look one gives a waiter who has interrupted a serious conversation. "Excuse me, officer," she said, her voice rich with the cultivated diction of the courtroom. "Are you addressing me?" "I'm addressing you," Thorne said, his hand resting on his belt near his handcuffs. "Management says you're trespassing. You don't have a membership, you don't have a ticket. You need to grab your stuff and exit the lounge immediately." Judge Vance closed her file folder deliberately. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding. I have a first-class ticket to Washington, D.C., departing at 11 a.m., which grants me access to this lounge. I showed it to the attendant at the desk. The manager called it in, Lady..." Thorne snapped, his volume rising. "He says you snuck in. Now I'm not going to ask you twice. Stand up." I did not sneak anywhere. Vance said, her tone hardening. She was used to commanding courtrooms not being barked at by beat cops. If the young man at the door is confused, we can clarify that. But I am not leaving. I am waiting for a document from my clerk. Thorne's face reddened. He wasn't used to no. He wasn't used to subjects who spoke back with complete confidence. I don't care about your clerk. I care about criminal trespass. Let me see some ID. Judge Vance sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. She reached into her purse. Thorne tensed his hand, dropping to his taser, a reflex born of poor training and paranoia. But she simply pulled out a leather wallet. She didn't produce a driver's license. She flipped it open to reveal a gold badge and a laminate card with the seal of the United States courts. My name is Evelyn Vance, she said clearly. I am a United States Circuit Court judge. This is my federal identification. Thorne looked at the badge. It was legitimate. It had the weight, the seal, the holographic overlay. But Thorne's brain couldn't compute it. A federal judge. Here being called in as a trespasser, it didn't fit the narrative. His ego stepped in to protect his worldview. Anyone can buy a badge online, Thorne sneered. I've seen better fakes at a pawn shop. You're not a judge. I assure you I am, Vance said, her voice turning icy. And I would suggest you exercise extreme caution in how you proceed, officer. You are currently impeding a federal judicial officer in the performance of her duties. Impeding, I'm arresting, Thorne declared. You're refusing a lawful order. You're presenting false credentials. Stand up now. The lounge had gone silent. Every eye was on them. A tech CEO at the next table had his phone out recording. Judge Vance saw the phone. She knew the law. She knew that resisting physically, even against an unlawful arrest, could give him cover to use violence. She had to comply to survive, but she would not be silent. I am complying under protest, she stated loud enough for the microphone on the businessman's phone to pick up. I am standing up. She rose, slowly smoothing her skirt. Officer, you are making a career-ending mistake. Turn around, Thorne commanded, grabbing her shoulder and spinning her. Hands behind your back. I am not resisting, Vance said as Thorne grabbed her wrists. He didn't just cuff her. He ratcheted the metal loops tight, pinching the delicate skin of her wrists. She winced, but didn't cry out. The sensation of cold steel against her skin was foreign and degrading. She had sentenced hundreds of people. She had never worn the chains herself. You are under arrest for criminal trespass, impersonating a public official, and resisting arrest. Thorne recited parroting charges that had no basis in reality. He shoved her forward, marching her past the stunned patrons. Kyle Reed stood by the door, a smirk playing on his lips, arms crossed. Judge Vance caught his eye. She didn't glare. She looked at him with a terrifying calmness. You should call your corporate counsel, young man, she said to Reed as she was shoved past him. You're going to need them. Thorne paraded her through the main terminal. It was the walk of shame designed to break the spirit. Hundreds of travelers turned to look. A black woman in a business suit handcuffed, being marched by a white officer. The optics were archaic, reminiscent of an era the country was supposed to have left behind. People pulled out phones. Flashes went off. Judge Vance kept her head high, staring straight ahead, her mind already drafting the filing. She was counting the seconds, memorizing the procedure, cataloging every violation of her civil rights. They reached the station precinct, a small substation tucked into the lower level. Thorne pushed her through the heavy steel door, feeling a rush of adrenaline. He had cleaned up the lounge. He felt productive. He shoved her toward the booking bench. Sit, he ordered. The watch commander on duty was Sergeant Miller. Miller was 56 years old, a 30-year veteran who was counting the days to retirement. He was drinking coffee and reading a sports almanac when Thorne burst in with his prisoner. Miller looked up over his reading glasses. He saw the woman. He saw the suit. He saw the face. Miller froze. He didn't know her name immediately, but he knew the type. And then he looked closer. He had seen her picture in the local paper just a month ago during a high-profile racketeering trial. "Thorne," Miller said, his voice trembling slightly. "Who is this?" "Trespasser from the Diamond Lounge," Thorne bragged, tossing his keys on the desk. "Claimed she was a federal judge, handed me a fake badge, refused to leave." Judge Vance sat on the bench, her hands still cuffed behind her back. She looked at Sergeant Miller. "Sergeant," she said, her voice calm and authoritative, "my name is Evelyn Vance. I sit on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. The badge in Officer Thorne's pocket is government property. I would like my handcuffs removed, and I would like to speak to the United States Marshal for this district, immediately." Sergeant Miller's face went the color of ash. He stood up so fast his chair knocked over. "Thorne," he whispered, "give me the badge." "Sarge, it's a fake she. Give me the damn badge." Miller roared a sound that made the dispatcher jump. Thorne handed it over, confused. Miller held it under the light. He ran his thumb over the engraving. He looked at the ID card. It was real. God, it was real. Miller looked at Thorne with a mixture of pity and rage. "You idiot," he hissed. "You absolute, unmitigated idiot." He rushed around the desk. "Judge Vance, I am so sorry. I am so sorry." He fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking as he unlocked the cuffs. As the metal clicked open and fell away, Judge Vance rubbed her wrists. There were red welts forming. She looked up at Thorne, whose confidence was draining away like water from a cracked tub. "Am I free to go, Sergeant?" she asked. "Yes, Your Honor. Absolutely. We can drive you." "I don't want a ride from you," she cut him off. "I want my property returned. I want the number of the captain, and I want this officer's badge number written down for me." Thorne stood there, his mouth slightly open. "But she was in the lounge. The manager said, 'The manager is a fool, and you are a liability,'" Judge Vance said, standing up and smoothing her blazer. "You didn't verify. You didn't listen. You saw a skin color and you stopped thinking. And now you are going to learn that the Constitution applies to everyone, even when it is inconvenient for your ego." The aftermath was swift, brutal, and public. The video from the lounge hit the internet before Judge Vance had even left the police station. By noon, it had 2 million views. By 2:00 p.m., the mayor was holding a press conference. The visual of a U.S. Circuit judge in handcuffs was a PR nightmare of apocalyptic proportions. The lawsuit was filed 3 weeks later. It named the city the Transit Authority, the security company Kyle Reed and Derek Thorne. The charges included false arrest, excessive force defamation, and civil rights violations under Section 1983. The city's lawyers took one look at the video, one look at the judge's credentials, and one look at Thorne's disciplinary record and waved the white flag. They settled for $6.8 million to avoid a trial that would have exposed the department's systemic failures to the world. Derek Thorne was fired 4 days after the incident. His fake badge defense was laughed out of the hearing room. He was stripped of his certification, ensuring he would never work in law enforcement again. Kyle Reed, the security supervisor, was terminated for violating the discrimination policy and for making a false police report. The security firm lost its contract with the station, but it was Judge Vance's statement outside the courthouse that lingered longest. She stood before a bank of microphones, no longer in handcuffs but wielding the full weight of her office. "I was lucky," she told the assembled press. "I know the law. I have the resources to fight. I have a title that commands respect. But what of the nurse, the teacher, the student who sits in that lounge? If a badge and a lifetime of service cannot protect me from the presumption of guilt, what protects them? We cannot arrest our way out of our own biases. Justice is blind, but the people enforcing it clearly are not. The city paid. The officers were fired. But the image of Judge Vance in shackles remains a stain on the city's conscience. It forces us to ask, in a country built on the rule of law, who is the law really for? Is it for the citizen, or is it a weapon for the biased? We have to do better. We have to demand that the people with the badges are worthy of the authority they hold. What do you think? Should police officers be personally liable for civil rights violations like this? Or is the department always to blame? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay safe, look out for one another, and never stop filming. I'll see you in the next one.